we went to this place called Rail Yard, and it just was a distinctly queer space. It was just nice to be in a space that was trans inclusive, body positive. It just felt so thoroughly queer that it was great. And I think that's what I'm really coveting and loving in the current moment, is how queer people are channeling space and building spaces and creating opportunities to find that celebration in spite of the fight that's necessary.
Everybody got your cups?
Yep. I got hot chocolate.
Oh, y'all look good.
I can go run over some whiskey.
I'm going to a happy hour after this, so I'll be drinking once we're done. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started for this evening. So we do want to start out and say good evening to everyone who is listening and who is watching. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas from our families here at Power Beyond Pride unto you. And we thank you for coming this evening and listening. So we want you to know that we are our stories, and our stories don't just stop at celebrations, and our strength doesn't fade with this season. I am Mattie, and I'm always the loudest one in the room. And I am so delighted tonight to be accompanied by three of the most sexiest men here that I have ever known. And if you are tuning in, you get to see these beautiful, sexy men with me. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves this evening.
All right. So I'll start. I'm Kenyon. I'm a writer, activist, sort of social justice, comm strategist. And this is the place where we don't just perform joy. We actually practice truth.
And where power looks like vulnerability, rest, and community. I am Daniel W.K. Lee, poet, author, and former Little Miss Sunshine.
Former.
Well, bring it up the rain and the cold is me. I'm Shane Lukas. So I'm a lifelong activist, harm reductionist, owner of a great idea, and a failed kickball shortstop. True facts. Also, I want to wish everybody a happy Kwanzaa. We had a great Hanukkah season. We support you sharing some of those stories from those 8 crazy nights, and especially all the other holidays that many will celebrate throughout the season. Tonight we're talking holidays, we're talking mental health, LGBTQ plus survival, the state of the world. Where could I possibly be doing with a year like 2025, and how we step into 2026 on our feet, in our communities. We're people who are caring and understand the different ways that we are trying to respond with joy, with resilience in this current moment. So tonight, I want to open it up with a 2-question hitter. I feel like we got a lot of sports metaphors going tonight, so I don't know what that's about. I mean, that's fine. Be a pitcher, be a catcher. It's fine. we're all here for all of it, frankly. We're all here for all of it.
Works ball.
I guess.
So I got to ask, what is your favorite and sort of most fond holiday moments? Like, what is there one thing that sticks out to you in the holiday season that you won't come back to every year?
I would say yes. So I actually have 2, and one is an actual event. But one of my biggest holiday moments, me and my family always talk about this, is on Thanksgiving night. It used to come on 97.1, which is the radio station here. But you knew Christmas was starting because at 9 p.m. on Thanksgiving night, they would play Silent Night by the Temptations. And that would kick off like all the holiday music. So then it was officially Christmas in my family. So that is one of our biggest holiday moments. And then I would say my fondest holiday moment is every year on Christmas Eve, me and my cousins always get together and have dinner and open up a gift. So that's our biggest holiday tradition.
I love that.
Yeah, I feel like for me, my one was like when I was a kid, we would always put up our Christmas tree and decorations. Like December 10th was my mom's day. It was like, was enough past Thanksgiving. And then we would take everything down the day after, like January 2nd, like right after New Year's.
Love.
But I remember also for like Christmases, my uncle, my mom's youngest brother, would come over usually on Christmas Eve dressed up as Santa Claus. And And he would usually wait until we were like in the bed. We had to go to bed. Like my childhood bedtime was 9 o'clock. So he would come after 9 o'clock when he knew we were in bed and knock on the door and be shouting from out the window, ho, 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 right? And, wake us up. And it would piss my mother off, but like he would do this every single year. That was like one of the things about Christmas and the holidays that was really fun. And just generally, my mom is super into like holidays. So it was always like our Christmases, in addition to Halloween and other things, were like always really, really big. So it was a good time.
Yeah, Christmas came really late to my family, obviously. Like Christianity was really attached to kind of the sponsors that helped bring us to our country, to this country. And so some of my earliest memories were, or kind of for a long time, like Christmas was basically going to the house of our sponsor and having Christmas dinner there. And actually, it was one of the few times that we'd have straight up American food. Like, I think that's the first time I'd ever had like chicken Kiev and like a cranberry, like Jello salad. There would be like celery inside and stuff like that. There's a photo of me like eating this chicken like completely like a cretin, like forks and knives, like trying to, is ridiculous. My siblings, we would kind of as I don't know, a thank you to them, we were kind of like encouraged or coached by my mom to sing Christmas carols at one point in the night to everyone. So we would like my sisters and I would like practice, and then we would go to this dinner, and then at some point we would sing for everyone and then get presents. And it would be like the only presents that we would get until a little bit later when my family kind of assimilated the whole Christmas tree thing and got into that. And now that my mom's a Christian, my older sister is a Christian, it's has a little more religiosity for them. But like good Americans, and so far as a lot of like secular observation, capitalist, just buying presents kind of thing for quite a while. So
I have so many different moments that I think stick out. But as this next year, I'm going to my hometown to do a TED Talk. It made me think about the 4 years I dressed up as a madrigal in the holiday season, that it really spoke to me about the holiday season. So I got to dress like a Renaissance, I don't know what you call it, but it was like a weird hat, the big puffy pants, and got to sing these.
Hopefully you will get joy out of that. I think you're about the only one.
They're not the most flattering photos that ever existed, but I did it for 4 years. I did it every year of my high school. And so every year, I mean, it was like getting Christmas songs I wasn't familiar with. And then there were some other sort of cultural touchstones that were actually kind of fun, right? So as a non-faith participant, it's nice to participate in some of those songs, right? And kind of, but also that not all of them were heavily religious. Some of them were just fun, like the Wassail song and other stuff like that. So it was fun to be able to do that. And was it embarrassing? Yeah, these photos are incredibly embarrassing. No bones about it. They are a thing. But I do love it, and it's fun. And I still go back, and sometimes we'll hear some of the Madrigal songs, and I'll sing along with them. And I wish I had the pipes I had then. I don't know that they're any good now. But I do really enjoy those memories a lot. And I think singing is a big part of holiday seasons, regardless of your faith participation. I think it's a great part of so many people's celebrations. And then I would say my current kind of routine, one thing that I love every year now is we actually go pick out a Christmas tree every year. And I do love decorating the tree, more of its pagan heritage than anything else. And I started to do natural Christmas trees over the last several years. So I had plastic trees forever. And then now it's a real tree, but yeah, that's past. So I don't know. Those are really fun. I like to think of those as pretty fun.
Wait, so you're going to Blormal?
I am. I'm going to be doing a TED Talk in Normal, Illinois in April of this next year, 2026. So
do we have any highlights as to what your TED Talk is going to be about? Yes,
it's all about values. It's all about values, really talking about values and what it means to have conflicting values.
Right.
So I'm pretty excited about it. I will be happy to share more later. But more so, I'm excited, and you'll love this, Mattie. I grew up next to Normal. and I've got to go do TEDx normal because who's the picture of normal? This guy.
I was like, next to normal is a little too,
On the nose.
Figured it right.
100%. Well, tell me something else. So as we think about these holiday season experiences, how can we use joy and rest and visibility in some ways as political acts or as spaces of resilience for ourselves?
Okay, I guess I'll start it off. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
Well, I mean, I've been thinking about that question in terms of like the recent or the most recent March for Palestine here in New Orleans, where effectively you can't really make a lot of. It's not going to influence like decision makers in Washington and our kind of smaller protest marches. But what was useful and has been useful is to kind of be just in community with people who have that same kind of common drive or concern. So that was kind of revitalizing, right? Like to see that, you're kind of obviously in the, cyber world, you're kind of not alone, but being physically in space with people who are also kind of aligned in terms of your concerns, your politics, especially for something that erodes your sense of common humanity, being around other people who kind of see that this thing that's happening is actually invigorating. And especially when the occupation is definitely seeks to kind of destroy any semblance of life, the celebration of life, any kinds of acts of resilience is defiance, is resistance. So, we have to indulge and enact in those kinds of things as well as part of a kind of a resistance practice, I believe.
One of the things that's been interesting to me, particularly this holiday season, is I've seen this in previous years, but I think this year, because of everything that's one of the many catastrophes that's been happening is around the ICE raids and deportations, and seeing people really use the Jesus story as a way to sort of point out to Christians the sort of hypocrisy of celebrating the birth of Christ, who was an immigrant and probably born in somewhere around what is Palestine right now.
And I'll definitely say, for me this season, when I think of using joy as a political act, I think of the fact that when I look at what's happened in 2025, the whole thing to me in a nutshell is trying to enrage us. I feel like our administration is trying to provoke people to act out or make everybody feel like there's this harsh negative. But in reality, one of the best things we can do is laugh. Like, I think if we continue to have a good time, if we continue to listen to comedy and hear, like Kenyon said, the carols and sing and spend time with your family, the joy is what irritates them because they want us to be upset. They want us to be angry. I mean, I remember a couple months ago when Don Trump kept talking about how there was all these cities that people were looting and it was violent in. He was talking about how Chicago was so violent. And then it's like, you see pictures and it's like, nobody's mad at nobody. Let it go. We're going to enjoy our lives because at the end of the day, life is hard. So I got to laugh at some shit at some point throughout the day. And then when I think of rest and visibility, like both those two things is I'm plus size. So I'm going to sit my ass down. If whether it's a sit in or if I just sit at home and let it be known that no, I'm not going to deal with you and put up with you. But those are ways that I use those things to use as a political act because defiance itself is the greatest political act I think we could ever do.
Well, and showing joy in that defiance, right? Like I just can't, I think the rest is necessary. I think if you're going to be an activist for a long time. So I will say my own story is a lot about trying to find that balance. And that's one of the reasons I've been doing activist work consistently, although I would say slower. Like there are definitely people who are far more engaged every day. They are doing stuff every day. And I admire it. Like they are people. I'm grateful that I'm able to support them in different ways, that I'm able to be there. But I realize that many of the people that I saw early on when I was learning to be an activist, to be in these spaces, to bring that courage into the room, was how exhausting it could be, how hard it is to continue to do that on a daily basis. And so I've always thought of it, and I'm sure you've heard me say it on the show before, this is really more of a marathon. I would love to think we could do as much as possible in a sprint. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit as we look at 2026. But I do think you have to think about your own care and your own work within these movements in this very marathon approach, with the caveat that people in the most amounts of privilege really tend to like a slow roll because they want to deal with their own discomfort. So that is not to undermine the urgency of responding to major needs and major changes that need to happen. It is to say that you as an activist can't live in that urgency and still address all the traumas and the experiences you have on a daily basis and find a kind of healthy balance. Like, it's hard to do. You have to take some space for respite and celebration and to go roller skating, which I did when I was in New York a couple weeks ago, and to sing and to do things, to do all the costume work that Daniel does for all of the parades. Like, that is, I gotta imagine that it is incredibly rejuvenating to go in and be creative, to have that element. So I think the holiday season is great for that. I think it's great for an end of year to be able to, as an activist, do a little bit of gratitude for where you have been and what you have done, and to take a minute and do that, and then really look forward and give yourself some space to think about what it is you want to build. So I love that. So that's what I think about this season. So the season makes sense.
I want to really bring up something really quickly, kind of going rogue on our agenda, because when I think about about kind of the rest and the joy and visibility, kind of this past, I don't know, so 3 weeks or so, kind of a big part of queer entertainment discourse has been heated rivalry, which I haven't seen. But I mean, this really, so everyone was off. Everyone's like, I got time. Let's watch this. Let's watch this shit, apparently. I still haven't watched it, like I said. But people are really into it. There's a lot of discussion about about this question of visibility of it, because as far as I know, there's only one actor that's in the show that's queer, and that's Francois, whatever his last name is. And it's written by a woman. And so there's been a lot of this kind of discussion, and there's a lot of like cis women kind of consumption of this that's taken a lot of air in the discourse, or at least online, right, about it. And so like, is this the kind, and the original text for the series is written by a woman as well, right? Which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but it certainly has raised a lot of conversation about I guess in a way, I haven't heard anyone phrase it like this, but the kind of like the straight female gaze on gays, and like, what is like gay visibility that's kind of put in a lens by cis women.
I mean, that's opening up a whole, first of all, I know I paused right at that. That may be the wrong place to pause there. But what I'm saying is it opens up a whole big conversation, because there's always been a lens of curiosity about queerness and the liberation that it represents, or at least the threat of debauchery and all that kind of, I would say salacious element has always been there. Even when you go back into the 1970s, you go back to some of the cinema in the 1970s, Taxi Driver, cruising, like,
Well, Al Pacino.
Yeah. Like, there's always been a little bit of that in the mix. And then I'm sure long before that, Kenyon, maybe you have some thoughts as to like how far back literarily queerness is sort of had a thing. But I think what's notable is that this is like porn. This is porn for like married straight women. So I don't know what to do with that. That's interesting. I mean, but the question is, are these people who support our rights too, right? I guess that's the weird part. Is this fascination among people who are fascinated by it and then end up voting and making decisions to harm other queer people? Because I'd love to think the representation actually leads to something constructive. Okay, well, if I find it fascinating, then I would hate to diminish anybody who has that experience. But this is America, so are they all like fans? I don't know.
I'm trying to respond to that. We probably do need to take a break. Daniel hit us hard. So while let's do that. Let's take a break and we're going to think about the answer to that question because that's an interesting question. And I want the conversation to go the correct way because I think that's what we're here for is to have great conversations. So look here, stay with us, pull up a chair, take a seat, get you something to drink, run to the bathroom. It's going to be about 30 seconds, not super long, but we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue talking about the holidays and how do you handle grief during the holidays. Okay? We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. This is Power Beyond Pride, a queer change making podcast, and I am not Kenyon. It was typically supposed to be him. He is the beautiful, sexy chocolate brother up in the corner. And then we also have the salacious, always literarily amazing Daniel here with us talking. And we have the dancing, skating, phenomenal TED talking person that I've ever known, which is Shane. And we are sitting here discussing a TV show called, what's the name of it again? I'm so bad with
Heated
names.
Rivalry.
Heated Rivalry. And that's sad because I've actually watched the entire series thus far and I still don't remember the name. But to jump back into the conversation, Daniel, I don't know. I mean, I get what you're asking, but let me ask this question. Would you have preferred the show to have been written by a gay man versus a cis woman?
No, I don't find it to be problematic when women write about male love or whatever, right? Like a lot of like what they call boy love, like anime is written by Japanese women. I just kind of like curious about the kind of overall discourse about it. I follow a guy named Mike. I don't know his last name on TikTok. He's really interesting. He's very left leaning. I mean, like real left. And he just kind of summarized kind of his feelings about at least the conversation that's kind of going around this show. He said cis women fetishize the closet and romanticize the trauma in this show, which I find to be really interesting. I mean, again, I haven't seen this, so I can't really speak to it specifically, but I can see how it is. It is, and his take on it would kind of emerge when he kind of juxtaposed like how cis women respond to the "I wish I knew how to quit you" scene in Brokeback Mountain. Like how they respond to that so differently from how queer people, especially queer men, respond to that. And that did give me insight, like how like there is this like heteronormative lens in which they're kind of reading it that allows, that kind of reifies like the erotics of a closeted life, right? And it doesn't ask them to question the society that still requires these individuals or these characters to be in the closet.
But don't you think in some ways that is not unrelated to almost the inverse, which is like queer men are particularly fascinated with the most tragic and debauched of straight women, right? Like the stories that we idolize are the Britney Spears stories or the Judy Garland stories.
Tina Turner stories.
There's an element of kind of vicarious tragedy somehow, catharsis maybe through it. And so, yeah, there's maybe an argument for straight women to be like, hey, I wish I could be sexually liberated. And that is, again, a bigger conversation around misogyny and women's bodies. But there is this sort of perception that all gay people, and certainly Heated Rivalry does not diminish this sort of rough and tumble, almost crude quality of sexuality, that I feel like watching Heated Rivalry, I'm watching people who have never had gay sex perform gay sex on screen. Like, it really feels like it feels like what straight people think gay people do in sex.
I
I heard that also from somebody, and another group person talking about watching the show, and I haven't seen it, but one response that I saw to that same kind of thinking was all sex in television and film is bullshit, right? Like it's all, no one's ever gets a leg cramp, or nobody, or like the things even in kind of heterosexual sex, people like preparation isn't happening. There's a range of things that like, so there's, I think your point. And I think that like in general, sex in film is in this sort of not quite the reality of how things sort of like always play out. So I think as I take your point, is probably true about it. Again, I'm going to watch it this weekend, but
Well,
also,
I would flip it and look at, not flip it, but like I would contrast it with, if you haven't seen Twinless as a film that I would suggest seeing. It's interesting to watch Twinless because the actor who's playing one of the gay roles is straight. There are moments in it that feel more intimate in a way that I think queer film and queer cinema has done a good job. So I hear what you're saying, Kenyon, that yeah, there's a lot of performance there. And there's certainly Brokeback Mountain's a good example of a film that's really interesting, but certainly loses a little bit maybe at some of the execution. But there are queer films that historically have done a good job dealing with intimacy, different body types, just the ways that people are, especially as they're working out kind of their own bodies and their own masculinity, in case of like gay men specifically. And I feel like Heated Rivalry is kind of trying to dance with the idea, but never, again, not in a way that I feel is relatable. So I guess I feel like there are other series that have been more relatable when as a gay man into that. And
it's interesting. I will say this is interesting to me because when I watched the show, it took me back reminiscent to Oxygen back in like early 2000 when the Oxygen Network had their little shows called Footballers' Wives and different, and it had the gay scandals on it. That it almost gave me like y'all were saying, it's almost like a daytime soap opera fantasy of what gay life looks like, or what the DL sports life looks like. To be honest, we really know nothing about certain sports, but I think it was more performative, most definitely, but it was reminiscent of that soap opera, Canadian, like European style TV show. So I couldn't take it but so serious.
What I guess what it's kind of bringing me to is that like the visibility of that, and again, I haven't watched it, but the kind of visibility that a show like this is, what to me it kind of exposes is that there can be like LGBTQ visibility with no actual stakes, like, and it's not moving the needle in any way other than eroticizing male sexuality within the context of capital, right? Of like entertainment, like consumption. And that it doesn't go beyond much of that, which is fine. I have no problems with that, generally speaking. I guess in a way I bring it up also to say that it ultimately is not a radical production. Like it is not really about change making. This is circling back.
I have to see it. I mean, I trust that to be true. I also haven't watched it. So I wish we had this conversation where we've all seen it so we could kind of like really get into it as opposed to just kind of guessing, or have a kind of a more specific analysis. But yeah, my just general sense of it is that this is not a revolutionary film. It's not. Doesn't mean that it can't have certain sort of political import, but it's maybe limited at best, right? I would say too, just quickly, that I think this question about there's several pieces of the question because it's partly about straight cis women writing and producing a piece of work that's about gay men and sexuality, and about probably straight actors playing queer folks on film. Like, I think there's like a number of different dynamics within that. Yeah, and other films that are, there are a lot of debates, particularly in the Black gay community, about Moonlight and some of those questions, and the choice to not actually have them have sex when they were adults, right, at the end of the film, and those kind of things, I think are all kind of legitimate things to think about when we think about that kind of representation. But I also will say too quickly that I think that given so much of the kind of, there was throughout the kind of gay marriage fights in the early 2000s, there's a lot of debate within the queer community. Some of it kind of meets tested by, kind of communications and PR specialists about how do we sort of sell marriage equality to the American public. There were a lot of debates about how much do we actually foreground and talk about the specifics like sex and sexuality as a part. And there was some decisions made to actually not. So that's why we got these sort of like very sanitized, what I always say, kind of well-fed, well-scrubbed, suburban, white, gay, lesbian kind of frameworks of what like the we're just like you kind of messaging within that. And so I think that because we're in this moment of backlash, I do think that there's a space for things that actually squarely present gay sex, right, or queer sex in a kind of a normalized fashion, again, for lack of a better word, that may have some political utility in a moment where there's such strong forces for us to just disappear.
See, you sharing that, though, is interesting to me on many different levels, as always. The one thing that really sticks out, though, is there was this push to try to create a more normal, I'm just like everybody else. And there is throughout the episodes I've seen, and I saw, if anybody who's watching this is familiar, just as a quick summary too, we talked about heated rivalry. It is it's specifically around hockey sports. It is around these athletes from varying locations and teams who have a on the DL, on the down low kind of relationship. There was an episode, the third episode, I think, that deviates a little bit to a story that gets picked up in the finale about this, again, kind of secret love affair and kind of the conflict in it. What I guess I'm interested in, though, and what you said, Kenyon, is there's a push to normalize gay people as everybody else. And I kind of get it in the sense of we want to be seen and treated with the same dignity as everyone else. But I do think in that process, we also not only created it more antiseptic, but we also made it so that it felt like it was more done. And I'm a little concerned about stuff like this. And this is where I think Daniel's question to me, I guess when I heard you ask, in this moment where heated rivalry is getting so much attention and so much push and so much media, right? And so much fandom, right? Are these same people really supporting queer people's existence and thriving on their terms? Or are they doing it in such a way as to say, you don't need any more than you've already got? See, you're already on TV. I can appreciate it. I can watch you. I can be a voyeur into this experience. But I don't want you taking what I have. I don't want you thinking about a place where you are somehow treated equally. And so these stories and the catharsis in them is really, again, it's about a liberation that maybe there's a little bit of envy in, to be honest. I think that's probably true for a lot of heterosexuals. But I also think that there's probably also a little bit of gay people who aren't comfortable with their own sexuality, who are just kind of living into this, I just want to be like everybody else. Because a lot of the stories feel very pedestrian romance in a way that, again, makes sense. It would be attractive to suburban white women, not to diminish, there are wonderful suburban white women, but, this idea of a predictable romance, you are the light of my life. I'm going to make the hard choices and choose the person who is the one I love in my dreamboat, which was not apparently probably your football player, suburban housewife that you chose back in the 1990s. Interesting in that way. Does it translate to actual rights? Because I look at other places where when you look at trans rights and trans participation, we see trans representation, and we see these same communities who certainly flocked and saw things that were mainstream, talking about trans identities, and then still vote and still encourage this sort of anti-trans. So I am nervous about that. I don't think representation necessarily means people are on board.
Yeah, I have to see it. I just can't, until I see it, I can't say more about whether it does or doesn't. I would say my concern is that without having seen the series is that even while it may sort of push certain things in terms of more explicit kind of sexual representations, et cetera, that if there's still ultimately kind of like young, fit, white male bodies, that it actually ends up producing a sort of, which was my critique of the same-sex marriage movement, was that because that was happening at the same time this conversation at quote unquote that Black men on the DL was happening. So it became to me actually a conversation in relationship to one another, that this is who we mean when we're talking about kind of expanding citizenship. And this is who we think is still criminal within their sort of queer sex, right? And so I think it may still produce that. I'm uncomfortable just doing all of this around a show I have to see.
But I will say
only
to
involve-
also add, but to add to your point, Kenyon, I do from watching the show, I will say it does to me push a DL narrative. And that's something that I don't like because the show does romanticize keeping your relationship DL and discreet and private. And that's like the undercarriage of each episode is, well, why do we have to come out? Why do we have to say who we are? And it's know that, so from that perspective, it is actually very damaging to the community because I feel like it's pushing that narrative of DL. Like it's okay to have your secret love affair. And that's not cool.
I'm just going to put a little final note on it. Kenyon and I have not seen it, but it just shows that you can have actually legitimate conversations about the issues that like cultural productions kind of bring up and whether or not in a way sometimes the actual the work can be talked about even if you don't see it like in specific ways and see the ramifications. I again haven't seen it, so and I probably don't have a problem with that other than to say that being able to acknowledge and see kind of the stakes of it is just helps him to contextualize what our expectations are for it in terms of quote unquote change making. And yeah, I just want to give that a second shout out to Mike on TikTok. Maybe he'll watch this. Maybe we can get him on the show. Yeah, has this line of fetishizing the closet and romanticizing the trauma. I think that's
it's into the season. I mean, there's a lot of behavioral, and I think that is sort of a missed piece of the series. At least again, what I saw, and certainly what I worry about missing in the conversation is the behavioral health impact. Right, like it is. This is a season where a lot of people are wrestling with many different issues. They're dealing with grief, they're dealing with changes, especially for a lot of queer community members. Like it's great for those of us who have great feelings with our chosen family and great experiences and memories with our chosen family. But also it does bring up a lot of stuff with our not so chosen family. And then many community members who face things from that. I do think with heated rivalry, like they really, they skirt a little bit of that in a way that feels, again, very much from a space of privilege. And I think also a space where the feelings are very simplified again, which makes sense. It's an entertainment piece. I get it. But this is a time where queer people, trans people, or trans plus community members are directly under attack. And behavioral health is a big factor. It is one of the things that you have to be careful about glossing over because being in the closet in the DL does have its ramifications. You don't talk about it a lot. Again, Kenyon mentioned Moonlight, different explorations about what it means to not live in your authentic self. But I should also note, Trevor Project got unfunded this year. And so community members have rallied around that. Other hotlines and other resources for community members have faced funding shortfalls that it is really important that as community members, we recognize it's cute on screen, but the people going through it oftentimes turn to a variety of different systems to respond, from alcohol to drugs to suicidality. And so making sure that as community members, we remember that these are real challenges that many of our communities face.
So as we go to break at our second break, I will echo what Shane just said. So if you are struggling this season, it doesn't mean that you're weak. And I think a lot of times we have to embrace that, like Shane was saying, that mental health, and especially this time of year, it's okay to say, I need help, or I need someone to talk to, or can you just sit beside me? So I need you to know that if you are feeling heavy like that, it doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're damaged. It means you have a history and you're still fighting. So I want you to remember as we go into our new year, continue to fight. Don't give up. Stand strong, because just you being here is already an act of resistance and defiance. So with that being said, stay where you are. Don't move. Don't leave, because we will be right back from this quick break. All right? Thank you.
Welcome to Power Beyond Pride. I'm Daniel, and I'm here with my co-hosts Shane, Mattie, and Kenyon. As we come into our last segment of the show, we just want to take a time to look back over the past year. What I want to know is from each of y'all is what is the most overlooked or over-focused LGBTQ related story to you in 2025? Or another tack would be, what was the most contentious or contestable issue that you personally faced in 2025?
I'll start off with that one again. I would definitely say, to me, the topic that was the most contentious or overly talked about, I would say for me, and this is my personal opinion, is trends in sports and in the college system. Because I still go back to, yet again, if a person has transitioned to the point that they are on a different team, their body is now not or ever a masculine or female. So I think to me that was the most played out conversation, because I think there's so much more we need to discuss deeper in the community. I think the government and people use that as a show pony to try to make it seem like, well, we're discussing something. And in reality, you've been discussing that topic for the past 2.5, almost 3 years, to be honest. So I'm kind of over it. And I would say, you said personally, what was the one thing this year?
Yeah, I mean, it can be both crossover. What was the most overlooked or overfocused story, or what was the most contentious or contestable issue that you personally faced in 2025?
Well, I don't think I personally face it. As I'll say what's original what I said. I think that the trans in sports was overplayed out this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think an underplayed story. I don't think that there was enough discussion of what the Trump administration's attack on public health programs means for people living with HIV and for PrEP, and for that matter, right?
Yes.
I
That's true.
saw sort of more of it in some mainstreamy publications, and even there, not a whole ton. But I know friends who were kind of community liaisons on clinical research trials for PrEP medications or for HIV treatment programs that were furloughed or laid off because of the Doge cuts. And so I think that there's a whole infrastructure around either prevention or treatment that we just, like, within the context of the community, I don't feel like there was a lot of conversation, much less outrage about, other than the specific people who work on those issues. But it didn't seem to be to kind of rise to the alarm writ large, and I think that it should have. And I don't even think that we haven't seen at this point the full ramifications of those actions.
That's true.
Absolutely.
I'll go next. I think we haven't talked enough about queer class. It's just a thing that I think as activists, as community members, that it seemed to sometimes surprise people that the Trump administration was funded by very wealthy gay people. And I think bringing that to light is really important. I think it's important to talk about what it means, because these are the same community members that are undermining a lot of the rights, a lot of the things that have been fought for the last several decades to get us to where we are, to the things that they benefit from, and to not have that be a center point in the conversation at times, because they are the money that is powering, from anti-trans legislation to other attacks on where queer people have access to school programs and other places that are affirming, like all of that stuff being cut and gutted, attacked. I mean, these are the people who are making that possible, because had it not been for Peter Thiel, Barry Weiss, or any of these people who were there actively putting this stuff forward, we just have to do a lot of internal looking at what it means in the community and that's cool liberation. And I think a lot of people have stepped away from it. So I would say, to me, that's something that gets overlooked, because I don't think queer people want to talk about it. I don't even know how to talk about it. And the people with the most amount of resource are the people we're talking about. And they aren't going to unleash any of those channels to have this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I would expand and maybe dovetail on that. I think kind of an overlooked, it's not so much of a story, but like really an issue, and that's kind of been ramping up, is kind of the limits we keep on facing. I think hitting the wall on the limits of the analytical tool of intersectionality, that we still have to think of intersectionality within a political climate or an ideological framework of, particularly within liberalism. And we have to kind of interrogate what we might assume about certain identities and what their political alignments are, which is echoes with what Shane is talking about with Peter Thiel and Barry Weiss, other LGs, let's just say LGs, right? And how they're serving their own interests, and that how they don't necessarily mean that they have really kind of radical or liberatory politics, whether it's a kind of reifying or just self-serving kind of one. Exactly, right?
I
would
didn't
love
know
to get.
their wife was queer. That's even news to me.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
she's
I'm not
she is.
surprised, like just seeing her, but like I had not heard that until this very second, which to talk about and I pay attention to shit. So like I get paid
Yeah.
to pay attention to politics, and I had no idea.
I would really love to get Matt Bynum, who's the executive director of CLAGS, and he is the writer of a book called Poor Queer Studies. And he definitely looks at class queerness. I think he would be a really interesting person, and maybe we can work on getting him on the show. I would love that kind of class analysis of kind of like
Class on class. So, okay,
Yeah.
can I ask a question? What's one good thing? Can you think about one good moment you had this year? So I know we've talked really about a lot of the absence
positive
of
thing.
challenges. Like, what's one good? Is there one good queer moment that you all got to live into this year?
Ooh.
I would say a good queer moment for me was turning 40 and learning that I don't give a shit about what people think about me. Hey, no, but seriously, I would say just this year alone, my self-discovery of my identity has been more queer affirming in the sense where I have a different pride about myself and loving about being different, being unique, being whatever I choose to be and be happy with it. So that would be my moment.
What about you, Daniel?
I mean, I've had some really great highlights. I think one of the biggest ones for me was winning the Patty Freeman writing competition in poetry. And the poem that I won it for was a poem about lyrical poetics. It's called A Confession to Gaza on Lyrical Poetics, and it interrogates this idea of like how in poetry we're told that in order to kind of elicit or incite empathy or sympathy, we kind of have to talk about our own shit, our own trauma. And so the framing of the piece is kind of like saying like how that's really kind of off, kind of because you're decentering what you really want to talk about, which is like obviously this atrocity that's happening in Gaza and West Bank as well. But in order to get people to feel it, I got to talk about my shit, which is like the kind of what we don't want to do in general in politics, which is like decentering other people's story, right? So anyways, like winning something as a result of that poem, I think has been really great. And I just feel really honored. And the literary community here in New Orleans is just something really kind of spectacular. And being able to continue to be a community and uplift, especially queer Palestinian writers and just Palestinian writers here in New Orleans has been really fucking great. Honestly, it's something as Shane says, which is like joy every day. I've been doing a lot of grasping at little things, I would say in the past month and change. And that's enough. It's kind of like the mother bird kind of giving little bits to like the bigger bird. And I'm just, this little thing, that's all I need. It's going to get me through the next thing. Because I've been seriously entertained for the past 9 months of like leaving this country. It's just, I love New Orleans. I love it so much, but there has been such drive internally to flee. And it's really interesting considering how much I love this place.
Yeah.
It's like, me and Danger Girl, Molly, you and Danger Girl.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and for similar reasons, like this was a very hard year for me, to be very honest. I feel like I lost a lot this year. I had to pivot and move across country. I had no plan for, relationship. A whole bunch of stuff kind of blew up this year that was difficult. I will say that personally, one of my favorite, just a thing that I was able to do early in the year was return to acting, which is something that I haven't done. I stepped away from performing. I really retired like over 20 years ago. A lot of people don't even know that was I was a theater major in undergrad. I moved to New York and was doing a lot of classical Shakespeare work all over the city and touring the country. But I got reached out to by Charlene Carruthers, if folks know Charlene, Black queer scholar and organizer, a former executive director of Black Youth Project. last December saying, hey, I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but I'm making a short film that's kind of about the Black Nations, Queer Nations Conference in New York in 1995. And I was like, Charlene, I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, she's like, I don't know if you're interested in this. I was like, I was an actor. And I said, I've been kind of thinking about, I feel kind of ready to maybe do some stuff again. And she said, oh, I had no idea. She said, well, I want you to play Essex Temple in this short. So we shot that in Chicago in January, and it's now making the rounds in the festival circuit. Film is called Plena. So if you are attending any film festivals around the country, you see Plena, check it out. So that for me was a big deal to kind of come back out of acting retirement in 2025. So that I'm super, super happy about. We'll see what happens in 2026.
I love that. I love it. And I think my queer moment is also about film. Even though music is like my life and I have all kinds of music stories, great, wonderful things that happened this year, going to concerts, a lot of stuff. But I'll tell you, Daniel, your hometown there, your hometown in New Orleans, being able to spend some time with you and my partner, we went to this place called Rail Yard. And it just was a distinctly queer space. It was just nice to be in a space that was trans inclusive, body positive, watching Paris is Burning on this screen and outside in this pool. It just felt so thoroughly queer that it was great. It was a really great moment. And then 2 months later, being able to interview for Power Beyond Pride, Dominique Jackson, who was one of the producers on the film that sort of looked after the individual who was murdered at the end of Paris is Burning. So again, to me, that was just such a great, joyous space. And I think that's what I'm really coveting and loving in the current moment is how queer people are channeling space and building spaces and creating opportunities to find that celebration in spite of the fight that's necessary. And so I think that Rail Yard, if you're in New Orleans, I do suggest checking it out. It's a wonderful space. There are a bunch of other places throughout the country I'd also be happy to suggest here in North Carolina, also in New York and other places around the country. But that really stuck out for me because I think it was just a great way to experience something that felt very organic, felt really distinctly queer, felt joyful. I know that the themes in Paris is Burning are both joyful and not. But maybe it's that honesty and authenticity and that range of experiences and emotions and being able to share that with community members that actually makes it as profound as it felt. So I really suggest other people also get a chance to create and go to where they can spaces that are distinctly. So I'd say that's one of my favorite moments of the year, and I got to spend time with gang. So always enjoy.
And make your own spaces too. I mean, there's been a little bit of what they've been, I guess, calling a comeback for, which is interesting because I don't think they've ever really left, but dinner parties. I heard a podcast. One of my favorite podcasts is called Proof, which is by America's Test Kitchen. And they were saying dinner parties are making a comeback. And I'm like, have they really left? But I mean, dinner parties are really fucking great. Back in Seattle, I continued a tradition that was started by other roommates back in New York, where we had a kind of a dinner party every first Friday of the month. And we kind of would have each person got to like invite someone, like a special guest every month. And it often was like, oh, who are you dating? Whatever, you kind of bring into to be roasted in the fire or whatever. But it was like having a set occasion to kind of be with your friends and share a meal and cook a meal and stuff like that is also a great way to kind of
once every couple months we do a vinyl record night, a vinyl pop night.
Absolutely.
And it's like a dinner party. Everybody brings something. It's all us queer folks. We'll maybe hang out in the pool, but generally speaking, we just kind of play records. And we'll bring a record. It's a white elephant kind of thing. So you bring it. You don't know who you're going to give it to, but you really will know about why it's important to you. And you give it to somebody else. So you can create your own spaces for sure.
Yeah.
That is a space of joy. And so thank you all for sharing the ways that you find those things. I'm grateful to be in community with you. This is all an amazing space. Thank you for being here. Are we at our final moments? What are our final moments before the new year?
Yes.
We want to raise our glasses or
Yeah.
mugs. Or I don't know if you have a cookie. I have cookies here too. I would give you all cookies, but I know Kenyon's gonna go have a few glasses or a glass, maybe a cookie. I'll send you all a cookie.
Well, Shane, real quick, before we go, as we end, what's one resolution you have for next year? What's one intention?
My intention is
Just one.
to be doing this again at the end of 2026 with all the fight and vigor and joy and community.
All right. Kenyon?
I think to write more. I haven't really felt much like writing this year for lots of reasons, and kind of feeling, and not necessarily to publish this yet, but that's a resolution.
Daniel?
Yeah, I have a little intention on, not really a resolution, I just have an intention or maybe a goal to get published in one of the posh literary journals. So yeah, we'll see.
It'll happen. What about you, Mattie?
I say my intention this year will be more visible and to be softer.
We cannot put you on enough stages. You and Kenyon, we need to get you and Kenyon. We got to do, since Kenyon's doing Shakespeare, I feel like we got to bring, I don't know. I'm a big fan of the comedy, so I'm always going to be like 12th Nights and whatever, but I don't know. Maybe y'all want to do like a Romeo and Juliet or I don't know. What do y'all feel like?
What, a Romeo and Juliet episode?
A Romeo and Juliet episode where you're going to read Romeo and Juliet the whole time?
No. No. That's too much.
That's
too much.
No, we'll find, since we can get back. There's so many great authors. We'll have to get you both on stage this next year. I think that would be a good goal. Can we get you both on stage this next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's highly possible for me this year. Yeah.
See, I'm putting the intention out there. We're going to get a live panel at an event sometime this year.
Why
Does that sound good?
Hey, let's do it. Most definitely.
Let's do it.
With Chris Fish.
All right. Well, again, we want to raise our glasses and toast to those we have lost, those who are still finding their way, and to those who need to be reminded that they need to keep going, even though it's hard. It does. It changes, and you will change in the process. It will change the world. It's part of change. And lastly, I'd like for all my fellow hosts to say with me at the same time to toast or raise your fist. Raise your fist as part of our Ludo to a power beyond pride. There we go. And so,
yay!
Yes.
So tonight, from our homes to wherever you're listening, may 2026 meet you with safety, with love, and a beautiful community. And as always, if you ever have a question or a topic that you would like for us to answer or discuss, send it to mailbag@powerbeyondpride.com or visit our site at powerbeyondpride.com to submit your question.
And for people who are like me that love to be seen, you can always do a video submission as well on any of our social media channels, Power Beyond Pride at Facebook, Instagram. We also have a TikTok, correct? And is that all of our socials? All right. So you can always submit a video and we will always have those on the shows with you.
well, that is all the time we have for a holiday reply all. It is our first episode of Power Beyond Pride will be on this next Tuesday. So that's exciting. And keep on the lookout. We have some amazing guests coming up. Matilda Burks and Sycamore, the author is Air Phenomenon, and just an incredible interview. Ryan Casada, the phenomenal guitarist and musician, will be joining us. We got many great people who are joining us this next year. So I look forward for you all tuning in for that. I am your co-host, Shane Lukas, and you can follow me at shanelukas.com. And probably I'll have some other socials next year. But for now, shanelukas.com is fine. You can also find me at greatidea.com. And I am so thankful to be here with all of my wonderful.
And I'm your co-host, Daniel W.K. Lee, and you can follow me at Strong Plum at Instagram and Upscrolled and Daniel W.K. Lee on Blue Sky. Remember to subscribe and get your friends to subscribe to Power Beyond Pride on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And check out our site at powerbeyondpride.com.
And I am Mattie, always the loudest one in the room. So I will always be here to have a good time. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself tonight with my co-host. You can find me on Mattie Simone 737 on Instagram or Mattie Bynum on Facebook. And Power Beyond Pride is a project from a great idea, a queer owned design and content agency. Learn more about them at agreatidea.com.
And I am also your co-host, Kenyon Farrow. You can find me on all the socials, just at my name, at Kenyon Farrow. This episode was produced by Shane Lukas. Mattie Bynum was the project developer. Our editor is Jared Redding, with support from Ian Wilson.
Oh, that's me. We're all part of the podcast co-host team. Yeah, we are. And also, you can also catch Kenyon in the film. So look up the short film and catch that. And then you can catch Daniel in all the literary journals too. So make sure you follow those. And you can catch Mattie actually in Atlanta next year on stage. So I do also recommend that.
Yes.
So keep an eye out for all the different ways that you'll be able to get to meet all of our amazing co-hosts. We have co-hosts from all across the country, and we are so grateful to be doing this every week. Remember to send in your questions, as Mattie said, at powerbeyondpride.com.
Check out our new episodes each week, and we look forward to queer change making with you next time. Thank you from all of us at Power Beyond Pride.